perfectly. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Right at the top of the hour here, we'll get going. We have a lot of content for you today, and I'm going to try to make this session really practical, useful, and actionable. Today's title is How to Move Certifications and Training Online Fast. We're going to have world-class strategies that we'll be discussing all day long, and this is the 55th installment here of the Talented Learning monthly webinar, thought leadership webinar series. Talented Learning is a learning tech and research and consulting company. We focus on learning systems, particularly in the association, continuing education, and extended enterprise markets. We help organizations, one, by providing content like today, and then two, by actually helping them figure out what they need from a learning system standpoint. And today is great because we've got just a fantastic expert panelist that's going to really help shed some light of some practical information. But we are recording this webinar, so we will send out the link afterwards. There's 3 speed polls in there, starting with the first one in just a second. We only leave it open for a second, so go ahead and answer though, because it's all relevant till today. Anytime today, feel free to ask questions in the question pane, and one credit for CAE credit for live participation today. So just email me and I'll make sure that you get that. But let's start off real quick by launching a quick poll. And there we have it. Go ahead, everybody, answer. We support the following trading audiences. So what do you support? Is it members? Is it customers? Is it your employee learners? Is it students in academia or students in general, your partners? We have such a diversity of the type of organizations that registered. We want to start off right here and just level set and see what we got. So we'll give you just a few more seconds. We have just about everybody voted. 3, 2, 1, and we'll close it and we'll share it. And just to show you where we're at right now, just look at that. So on a topic like this, on moving content online fast, we really attracted a variety of different organizations that all have a common problem. And that's how we structured today to talk about that common problem. But we have members, lots and lots of customer education, employee education, number one, still from students in academia and even partners. And I think that's indicative of what we're seeing in the marketplace in general right now is organizations of all types, all sizes, all flavors are struggling with how to move. And so one of the things that we did to most of the registrants, thank you for everybody that took the time to respond to my open-ended question. But we wanted to make sure, since we had the experts here, that we were asking the right questions, not just the questions I thought were the right questions to ask these folks. So we got lots and lots of responses, but how do you prioritize your content? Material to include, finding trainers who have virtual skills, transforming lesson plans from face-to-face to online learning, tips for content conversion, how to engage the audience, how to teach technical content, technical integrations, instructors to accept online teaching versus face-to-face, platform needs, some more platform needs, security, proctoring, dealing with a sheer volume of content, familiar and speed of delivering online delivery, understanding software problems. So you can see that there's a lot of probably the same questions that you've asked. You might see represented there, since they are all verbatim questions. But what we did is we took all those questions and we organized them, and really they fell into about 5 different categories. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through each of those categories. And we structured today, so I'll have 10 minutes for each category, and we'll talk about the business side of that, the strategy, content questions, 6 content questions, people questions, like how do you deal with the human resources part of this shift online, technology and marketing and promotion. And so we're gonna focus our questions on there today. Feel free to ask more questions. If we don't get to them today, we'll make sure that we get to them as a follow-up afterwards. And so who could possibly be qualified to talk about that? This motley crew. I'm John Lay. I'm the CEO and lead analyst at Talented Learning. Been in continuing education and learning systems now for almost 25 years. It's my pleasure to host today and drive the questions for the roundtable with our distinguished experts that are here. And many of you may already know Ashish, because he was the star here of a recent podcast, number 37, on the Talented Learning Show. But Ashish is CEO, Rangnekar is a CEO and co-founder at BenchPrep, where he leads the company's mission to enable nonprofits, corporations, and training companies to improve their learning experience for professionals and accelerate their careers. He oversees sales and marketing functions, which has doubled the company's revenue growth for 4 years running. He also operates as a strategic advisor to leading educational and training organizations as they maximize engagement rates, revenue opportunities through digital transformation. Ashish knows continuing education and online learning, and we're thankful to have you here, Ashish, to share your knowledge today. Thanks for attending.
Super excited to be here. This is one of my favorite topics. So great to be on the webinar, and when John calls, you show up, and here we are.
Well, thank you. Our other guest today from the doing side, from the world's largest provider of vendor-neutral certifications, highly experienced in the education market, is Ryan Blankenship, VP of Product Management and Marketing at CompTIA. As VP, Ryan is responsible for managing the P&L of CompTIA's certifications and learning products, as well as leading the teams that develop and deliver those products. So great specialty of not only marketing it and figuring out what you need, but building the teams to actually do that. Prior to CompTIA, Ryan was at McGraw-Hill Higher Education, where he managed the mathematics, chemistry, and engineering portfolio of print and digital learning content. Ryan spent the last few years moving his content online, and we just can't wait to hear the real life experiences and practical lessons out of that. Ryan, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here, John. Thank you.
All right. So that's the crew. We're going to spend the rest of the day. So we just had a few minutes there, 7 minutes of the upfront to get us introduced. Every minute from now on out is pure content. And so we're going to start out by setting the stage, or having Ryan set the stage on CompTIA. Those in the IT industry probably already familiar with this organization. If not, Ryan, could you please tell us about CompTIA and your overall certification business, and I guess set the stage for the rest of the questions that we'll be asking you today.
Yeah, for sure. So you'd already mentioned CompTIA is the global leader in vendor-neutral IT certification. So vendor-neutral meaning not Microsoft or Amazon. They're training and certification programs for their cloud services like Azure and AWS. Those are largely focused on teaching employees how to use those products. We're focused on a lot more of the entry-level market. 0 to 5 years is our sweet spot, so to speak. But second only to Microsoft in terms of certified alumni. We have about 2.6 million alumni. We deliver over 300,000 exams typically in a given year. So lots of growth there. The big areas we specialize in are entry-level IT, core IT support, cybersecurity, in data and infrastructure, so things like cloud, server, et cetera. Our mission really as CompTIA is to solve for the skills and jobs gap. Just taking COVID out of the equation, if you look, for example, at the openings at the end of Q4, so December of 2019, there were over 1 million jobs posted for IT roles across the board that are unfilled. So and IT can represent up to 1 of every 10 job ads across the board. So lots of gaps there. On top of that, there's also gaps within the organizations themselves. CIOs will tell you that their number 1 concern is upskilling their employees and having them keep up with technology and security as it advances. So that's our mission, and we really enjoy the work that we do. Get to work with a lot of people, career changers, and things of that nature.
Wow, that's excellent. That's just an amazing amount of students and alumni and throughput that you have in a given year. What's CompTIA stand for, by the way, real quick?
What does it stand for?
Yeah.
It's
the acronym.
The acronym. Yeah, it's the Technology Trade Association, essentially. So we also have the other 3 parts of the business are we have advocacy. So we advocate for the entire IT industry with office in Washington, D.C. We also have a foundation that helps deliver our products and services to people in need, a lot of people in underserved populations. And then our last piece is our membership part of the organization, which is sort of the foundation of how it was created, which was originally a trade association with IT, but we now have a lot more focus on education and training.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, thank you. All right, let's keep moving on. That's a good foundation. We'll continue to dig on that. And Ashish, why don't you tell us about BenchPrep and your organization real quick, and how that's relevant or extremely relevant to this conversation.
Definitely. So we are a Chicago-based learning technology company. And John, as you kind of pointed out earlier, our mission is to empower learning organizations to thrive in the digital world. How do we do that? We have a modern learning platform that helps learning organizations deliver the best-in-class learning experience while generating revenue and retaining customers. So we have been fortunate enough that through our partners, we have served more than 6 million learners. And we serve 3 primary segments. Right? So and we focus on the professional learning space. The first segment is world's leading credentialing bodies and associations like CompTIA, CFA Institute, American Bankers Association, and so on. We also work with for-profit training companies like Richardson Sales Training, C2 Education, and so on. And then we are beginning to do a lot of exciting work with extended enterprise, where we are helping corporations engage, educate, and train their customers, partners, and resellers. Now the question is why? Like, why do we do what we do? And there are 4 guiding principles that I wanted to call out, because that's going to kind of provide meaningful context to all of my comments for the rest of the conversation. So there are 4 guiding principles that we follow. First is that lifelong learning is an absolute economic reality. It's not a buzzword anymore. Upskilling and reskilling has become a C-level issue. The world, we are seeing that the world has decidedly shifted away from the traditional front-loaded accreditation to occupational licenses, professional certifications, and a system of learning that is focused around skills. Second is we are seeing that the modern professional or the modern learner is just very different. Right? They are untethered, on the go all the time. They are impatient. They can't watch a video any longer than 12 minutes. They are distracted. They get too many text messages, too many Slack messages. And learning organizations have a lot more to do to engage the modern learner, because now we are competing with the likes of TikTok and Instagram. So the perspective is very different. The third thing is, as learning becomes more lifelong and micro, it's important to be able to demonstrate competency. So we do a lot of work helping learning organizations focused on giving verified credentials, because what matters is not just the fact that you have gone through learning, but to be able to demonstrate that you can apply that knowledge to drive business impact. And all that brings us to the point that, so what do the learning organizations have to do to support lifelong learning for modern professionals? And it's clear that the answer is to think digital first, digital all, and digital only. And that's why we have made it our mission to help learning organizations think digital first, digital all, and digital only.
We're in the right place, on the right presentation, as the right panelist. All right, that's great. Okay, let's do another quick poll, and as we get into the discussion. So tell us about how COVID has impacted your training business. You can check all that apply here, but is it business as usual? Do you just doing it from home now? Has it really accelerated the live learning to digital conversion? Are you now, this is a really interesting one, but a lot of organizations are now asked to support additional audiences and learners that they previously weren't for one reason or another, probably because they relied on other medium. Are you ramping down your training efforts? Is your target audience impacted and you're just tightening the belt, or any other? go ahead and answer that in the question pane if there's other ones. And we'll go ahead and give you a couple more seconds here. And 3, 2, 1, close. All right, so take a look at that. So from a distribution standpoint, everybody here is, not everybody, but so many of us are in that same boat of accelerating that live training to online conversation. And that's where we're going to focus on that. Supporting for the new audiences and learners, that's an interesting, and it is, a significant portion of us are ramping down our efforts. So all in all, that's not surprising. Ashish, what do you think? What you would expect?
So first of all, let's acknowledge that we are all living in an unprecedented time as this COVID-19 situation continues to impact not just the regular course of our business, but also our lives. And the polls says it all. Only 8% of you said that nothing has changed. So this is not business as usual by any means for anyone. I feel in the long run, and we are seeing in this in the market, in the long run, this will be really good for the training and certification business. The future of work has arrived early. Over the next 18 months, we're going to see that as workers return to work, the job role and the skills required to succeed would have changed dramatically. And this is going to create a huge opportunity for the training and certification business. I mean, just think about it. The rapid digitization in some areas of economy and the job market will amplify the existing need for IT talent. And Ryan is an expert on this, so I'll let him elaborate. But on the other domains front as well, I mean, think of supply chain, retail, hospitality. Each one of these is going to have their job structures transformed, and all of which would require training and certification. So in the long run, this is going to be good. Now let's talk short run. In the short run, we are seeing mixed reaction. Few segments are emerging. There are organizations that have already invested in digital learning. They are thriving. CompTIA is a great example of this. These organizations cannot keep up with the demand. And I also saw a few people on the poll saying that they are seeing that acceleration. These organizations are doubling down. They are ahead of the curve. Then there are organizations that almost took pride in saying, we don't have any digital footprint. These are the ones that are struggling and scrambling. They find themselves in a situation where digital learning has suddenly become a matter of revenue and business continuity. So we are seeing kind of a mixed reaction. I mean, in general, we see that this is going to be kind of really good. And there is short-term action to be taken, but this is a long-term play.
Okay, well, let's get back to that in just a second. Good summarization of how it impacts would be interesting. Feel free to enter in the question pane if you're training and certain, if you see something different than that, but that's similar to what we're seeing or identical really out in the marketplace from our perspective at Talented Learning. But let's follow up with a second question and start getting into some actionable advice. Ryan, based on your experience moving CompTIA certification online over the last few years, what are success metrics that you think that our listeners should establish as practical and realistic guideposts to achieve rapid transition? Now, I know you had the luxury, of course, of and all organizations did up until 2 or 3 months ago, a multi-year plan. But we're hoping that you can really, think about that multi-year plan. Think, all right, now if I was to flash, how would you do it? What would be the best way? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to get in that in a little bit later in terms of just actual content. But just a little background. So with CompTIA, we acquired 2 content companies about 3 years ago, and I was brought over really because of my background in e-learning, building e-learning platforms and content. And so we bought training content from a couple of our partners because we wanted to get into the training space. For 30 years, CompTIA had only been in the certification space, not on the training side. And we did that for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason, really going back to our mission, which is solving for the IT skills and jobs gap, is that we were seeing just that, especially for people that are an entry level situation or a job changer. Clearly, if you've got 1 million open jobs, if only the nerds that love IT get into IT, which is what's been happening for years and years, that's not going to solve the gap. And we thought to ourselves, well, how do we help more people be successful? And you know, although we have the exams, there's a ton of different ways that you can train, right? You can buy a book, you can take an online course, you can do something in person. But for us, the mandate was, if we create the best quality content, which is my mandate, we're gonna hopefully have more people that have more access to better content. We're gonna up the game for everybody, but content is a way of impacting things. You know, you can't control for instructors, you can't necessarily control for students and their backgrounds and their varied experiences. But if you have great content, you can spread that across and scale that. So that was the first thing we decided to do, is go after content. Working with BenchPrep has been fantastic in terms of the kind of things that I look at. So my team is very focused on job mentions and job mandates, whether they're government or Best Buy or General Dynamics or Booz Allen, right? So we're looking for job mentions and mandates. We do research with our research teams to demonstrate how people with certifications actually perform better at their jobs, are there longer, and are more frequently promoted faster than other people. So certification, in a lot of ways, it's causation and correlation, but a lot of that is proxy for the type of person who goes after a certification, as opposed to one that does not. Other things that we look at is we build a ratio between content sales and our certifications, so that we can have a measure to see how successful we're doing in terms of penetrating the market. Because one of the interesting things that we do know is that the train to test ratio, at least in the IT space, is about 5 to 1. So you'll have 5 people train, maybe 1 person test. So the content opportunity becomes enormous. And to sort of wrap this into what happened with COVID, we had a month where Pearson had closed down its testing centers, Pearson VUE, and over 90% of their tests were not being delivered online. Now it's about 95 are being delivered online. So they had to go through a rapid shift, and it took us a month. We had a month gap where nobody could sign up to take a test, take a voucher, and use their voucher. But during that period, the continuity of the content business actually grew. It was stable and even better than it was last year. So great example of how having both content and training, owning most of that ecosystem, can really help your bottom line.
Do you think it's important to establish what those success metrics are before you begin your transformation, or did you kind of build them along the way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the big thing, and you can attest to this, if somebody's looking to get online and they're not yet, I'll touch on this later. I think you really have to have a really nice set of requirements, because finding the right partner, as we did with BenchPrep, is critical.
All right,
and I think
great.
we got those things you're looking out for. Yeah.
All right, great, thanks. Ashish, real quick follow-up on this. So you're in that first group that you talked about that took pride in the live veracity of their content, and that was the differentiator. Say you find yourself in that bucket. Any quick advice you could offer on how they get the transformation started? What would be the...
Yeah, I mean, see, first of all, I would say, if you are a learning and training organizations, in whatever bucket you are, you should be playing offense right now. Right? You have a chance to transform yourself as a business, make significant revenue, and most importantly, really impact life by helping learners. Right? So we should all feel fortunate enough to be in a situation where we can actually have this, double bottom line impact in this situation. Now, if you are an organization that has not made the leap yet, I would recommend 3 things. First is transition to digital ASAP, obvious, but prioritize speed over everything. Do not overcomplicate converting in-person training or analog training to online learning. keep it simple. I would highly recommend find a partner that can deliver quickly today and at the same time help you grow and scale in future.
Mhm.
As I said, there is short-term action needed, but there is a long-term play. So that's first. Second, I would say focus on the marketability of certifications. Today, training and certifications are more valuable than ever. In fact, I just read an article in New York Times, I think it came in today or yesterday, that highlighted how MOOCs, the massive open online courses, right, are booming because of education, right? So upskilling and reskilling needs have been accelerated as a result of COVID-19. So let's ensure that your marketing plans communicate that urgency and value. And in general, I feel that you all, the learning and training organizations, are very well placed for this acceleration. So one is from a product side, what to do, but even from the marketing side, kind of just go all in. And
Yes.
third and last thing I would say, John, is start thinking long term. Right? Start thinking digital first, digital all, digital only. Today, or even I would say three months ago, digital might have been one of the many channels or one of the many product lines. Over the next few years, what's going to happen is digital will become the primary channel for delivering learning and training and will cover a majority of L&D spend. And that's the long-term play everyone has to solve for.
Yeah.
I feel even the learning and training organizations that have not invested in digital are sitting on a gold mine, which is content. So let's start with content, let's transform it, and then build the business accordingly.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Good advice. Good advice. And since we're there on content, let's go back to Ryan. So, you had all that instructor-led content, and you had to not only get it to a digital. And when we say there's a question from the audience on digital, I think digital is really the overarching umbrella on any type of online content. But you had what did you learn in that process of taking it online? Was it a one-to-one translation for you? Did you have to, resort your, resort your whole approach and your instructional design? Did you, was it a continuation of what you'd done before, or was it really like pulling a lever and thinking about things totally differently? What have you learned, and what do you wish you knew 3 years ago? Big question.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is, to really comment on Ashish's point is to focus on, to have a few really important goals in mind, but to work work with speed. That's the important part, and to not make this process, don't overcomplicate it or overwhelm yourself. If you just need to get online fast. The first thing I would say is, one of the things we struggled with is that, if we were going to say have our own platform or just have an LMS that doesn't play content, right? Doesn't have a player built in really, or an organizing content player. We would have to, hire headcount. We would possibly have to have engineers, UX people, things like that. Those, having to hire new people to build a team to manage this is not realistic in the short run. So having somebody like BenchPrep, what we really liked about that, for example, was they have a really modern UI UX. I think you have to have something that's HTML5 browser based. Something that has LTI integration is huge because so the content, some of the more complicated content may have to come from other third parties. But with BenchPrep, you've got a really nice, what I call like an inline assessment. So you'll have some reading and then a video and then another assessment and then some textual materials. So you can incorporate a blended learning environment so students don't get bored. To Ashish's point, my kids are watching TikTok videos all the time, and I know that they would rather do BenchPrep than they would like an LMS. So that player in there is really important. You can also set the date for your certification exam, and it will build the learning plan for you. And that's not only critical for B2C, but also B2B, because when you're having to go online quickly and that builds out that plan for you, and you can say to students or learners, hey, go finish, chapter 1 or objective 1 today. those types of things where they aren't having to create the assignments, they aren't having to manage those assignments is huge. So I think finding a good partner that fits around whatever the audience is that you have to serve is incredibly important. Again, I think the focus on speed is important. The last thing I would say is that for my internal team, we were for the longest time building our own content, right? And so when you're in the content authoring side of whatever provider you have, my team that I inherited, great team, they were building a lot of the content themselves. So I think the other thing is you have to take your people from content builders and turn them into architects, because the other key to speed is cloud sourcing with SMEs, right? So if your team is a team that's been used to building things themselves, they're going to have to turn into architects. And what I mean by that is they need to manage the process and quality and work and requirements and establish those and have a process that you can rapidly develop content, if that makes sense. So they can't be the ones that are writing the content like they might have usually been doing and building the content. They really need to become the people who are facilitating and architecting the types of outcomes and content they want, so that you can work with contributors and other groups to experts in the field to create that content rapidly. It's the only way you can get it done.
Wow, interesting. So to summarize, it sounds like what you did is you chunked your content down, you tied it to objectives, you keep it nice and varied in terms of the path that organizations can go, or learners can go through to get it streamlined, and you've made it so that your team can expand its horsepower by building the template, so to speak, and then keep on plugging in resources to help. And so that was a way that you could just move it all faster forward.
Right. Exactly.
Sounds perfect. Sounds great. Good advice. Ashish, what about speed is of the essence? What's the easiest thing to do to make online content interesting? Because that's the part here. So it's not just it's not just doing what we're doing today, putting a camera on yourself and saying, now we have online. You got to make it better than the competition on this content. So everybody's going online at the same time. Quality and being the best is key. What advice would you give to make this interesting, and piling on to what Ryan said?
Yeah, so see, I mean, as Ryan said, speed is of essence. I would almost kind of call out that prioritization is another keyword here. And when I have some spare time, I would want to lobby for having prioritization as a concept that is being taught in high school curriculum as well. But more so in this particular situation. So let's kind of unpack this. So first is like, how do we prioritize? And then second is, once we have prioritized what content to be transformed online, what do we do with it? And when it comes to prioritization, there are a couple of ways of looking at it, right? So no one can actually kind of bring everything online right away. Right? And when we worked with CompTIA, we actually started off by building a very robust roadmap of how we're going to transform content over a period of time. Right? What do we work on first, and then what do we work on next, and so on and so forth. Right? And there were a couple of criteria that we used. So first was just simple enrollment, right? How do we actually create the maximum impact? Right? So let's consider courses or programs that have the highest enrollment so that we can actually have highest impact. Second was identifying content which would specially benefit from modernization and digitization refresh. Right? There are just some courses or some concepts that are better taught in a digital environment, and let's use this as a way to almost critically look at how the content is structured, where to insert interactive and visually engaging opportunities, introduce micro learning, and transform it. So that was the second. Third, right now what we are doing with a lot of our partners and customers is also just kind of considering programs that have been most impacted by the unpredictableness of the current COVID-19 situation. Right? So if you actually have something which is delivered in a instructor-led training format, which you just have no means to deliver it, you just have to convert it. So there is another kind of element of urgency on that one. So these are kind of few ways that you can prioritize. Once it's prioritized, then it's a matter of, okay, how do we actually transform the content, very quickly? And there are kind of few elements here. So first is, the least efficient way of doing it is trying to invent your own solution from scratch. I would recommend seek out individuals and organizations that have a long history of making content engaging. And by the way, this piece was so important that we ended up making huge investments and ended up building a learning design and strategy team in-house, that where their sole purpose is to help learning organizations rethink content and transition online, right? And you would note that I'm not kind of saying upload content online. That's not the goal. It's truly looking at content, transforming it so that it can be delivered and consumed in the digital space. Right? So that's the first piece. I mean, just find a partner. Second, I would recommend that, given again that speed is of essence, find a learning delivery product that has a lot of engagement features that go beyond the content. And these are like little hacks in place, right? But imagine tools like flashcards, right? Video bookmarks, learning confidence, in-app discussion boards. These are all capabilities that would transform the learner experience with little to no adjustment to your content. That's kind of another kind of speed hack. Third is, I would call micro learning. Right? And this is an important one, because as you transform your content, it'll be a good time to align to some research driven learning strategies as well. Right? And I'll give you one specific example around forgetting curve. Right? We all know that it's well understood that within 30 days, roughly 79% of the knowledge is forgotten. So to help learners combat this forgetting curve, you have to deliver content within like spaced intervals. And this is an interesting piece because you don't need to create new content. You already have content. You just need to structure it differently. For that to work, you have to look at the content, slice and dice it in bite-sized chunks, build meta tags around it, and without further investment in creating content, now you actually have a research-based learning product that can be delivered digitally.
If you're going to have to convert it, you might as well just do it right from the beginning.
Yep.
And break it into those pieces, and that gives you all the advantage. We're going deeper in this, but this is an important topic. So once you break it into all those pieces and you have it in that micro format, Ryan, how does adaptive learning play into that? Do you use any concept like that in your content?
So yeah, of course. What I would say is that this is really, I think, Ashish and I are making very similar points in the sense that when I was referring to the player aspect of BenchPrep, it's different than when you're just talking about uploading to an LMS. It doesn't really have a structure or a player, a content player to it, right? And so the tools, you're taking your content and you're putting it into tool sets and templates and things of that nature. And so BenchPrep has a very large variety of those sorts of things. So, to Ashish's point, you may have to change some things. You might write probes, additional probes, but a lot of that will just come from your existing core content. But to your second point, John, in terms of the
adaptive piece.
Yeah, the adaptive piece. Sorry, thank you. We have a lot of different learners, a lot of different backgrounds, right? So one of the things is making learning efficient. So if you have adaptive, we have people, we might have a network engineer that has to get one of our certifications because he has to qualify for a job or a promotion or some contract work, and he may know 80% of what's on that exam. I don't want to make him study for 40 hours, right? He wants to go in, or she wants to go in and focus on the areas where they may just not be as proficient because it's not a part of their daily job, but they have to pass this. And that's the situation a lot of our customers are in, right? So it's great for them to be able to have an adaptive program where they can focus on the things that they need to know and not kind of watch the whole movie, so to speak. And on the other side of the equation, we have people that are coming in that have very little experience in IT. Maybe they're tinkering, maybe they set up their mom's Wi-Fi or something, and now they're getting curious about this. That person's going to need a lot more time and patience. So adaptive is also going to cater to them as well. So that piece of adaptive is extremely important, I think, across the board, especially when you're dealing with career changers or veterans. It doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. And so the concept then is what, Ashish? You take a pretest that's tied to all those different pieces, and then you can reassemble those pieces dynamically based on what somebody knows or doesn't know. Is that the goal?
I would say philosophically, we got to accept that learning and training is a means to an end. And I think that's why, as Ryan pointed out, efficiency is important. Right? How do we actually get people to become competent in the shortest amount of time? Right? So what we do is, our approach is to not go to our partners and say, create a bunch of content. And that's expensive. So we actually look at content, we create a lot of tags and a knowledge graph around it that's mapped to specific competencies and mastery levels. And then we create an adaptive pre-assessment. So you come in, you take the pre-assessment, and then based on that pre-assessment, we can identify what are your strengths and weaknesses. And by the way, if you're really strong in something, don't bother with kind of going through all of that, right? Focus on your weaknesses, and as soon as the system identifies that you are making significant progress, we present a post-assessment, you prove your mastery, and you move on.
Mm-hmm. And really, that's no more incremental work. We'll move on off this, but that's no more incremental work, because you're going to create your competencies, you're going to create your assessment questions anyway. But the magic is, why make somebody take 60 hours if they only need 20? And there's a great way for speed to competency at that point. All right, cool. Let's continue moving on. So from a technology standpoint, so probably a lot of the attendees are saying, oh, this is great, spaced repetition, adaptive learning, or, all these great terms and all these things that we got to do, and we got to go fast, but how do you know what you need? When you Google LMS out there, you could just spend the rest of your life going through the results on all the different types of organizations out there. So Ryan, from your perspective, you went through this process, you figured out what your most important considerations were. How'd you do that? And any recommendation now that, organizations might need to get a platform fast, not necessarily a specific platform, but how would you do that safely based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your comfort level and your background, your experience, if you've done this type of thing before. The first thing I would say, to your earlier point, and we didn't do this, but we probably should have, because the space is so large, I would try to employ a consultant if I could get a hold of one. John, I don't know if you know anybody that does that type of work, but the point being is that, yeah, right. The point being is that it is a very big world out there. There's a lot of different platforms, and you don't want to overbuy or underbuy the platforms. They're going to be more expensive or less than expensive based on the bandwidth. And just the level and the depth and breadth of the functionality. And it's easy to make a mistake and go with somebody that is kind of maybe a well-known name in the industry, but it just doesn't fit for you and your customers. I think you have to think too, really important to think, do you have B2C and B2B clients, right? Are you going to be reselling this to end user customers, like training partners and academic institutions, or is your audience primarily B2C? I think we touched on this a little bit before. You can't just take your in-classroom experience and look to plop that into an LMS, because that's exactly what it will be. It likely won't be successful because it won't be engaging. It'll be a little static. So, I think those are the things that I would say are important. But I think the last thing I would say is you have to build a requirements document. You have to know what your product strategy is. You got to know who your customers are. and you have to create a set of requirements. If you don't, and that needs to be your rubric by which you filter all the different presentations that and all the different things that you look at when you're looking for an LMS. But I think that if you're uncomfortable with it, a consultant can quickly help you get up to speed, and help you only maybe go to 3 or 4 different partners that are really suited to your needs.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think piling on that last piece really resonates with me, and that's starting with that business model and who those audience truly are, and what those use cases are, and focus on what you want that to happen, whether that's B2C or business to business, but focus on those use cases and what you want that learner to do, and that'll give you a salient list of what those requirements are. Kind of the reverse to do that is to look at all the possible requirements of LMS in the universe in a spreadsheet and say, yeah, I need this, or maybe this or this, and then what you'll get is a nice talent management system and not a continuing education system. So,
yeah, but I think most of your learners are probably only going to use 20% of the functionality, and you probably will too, honestly. Sure. So keep it simple at first, especially if you're looking for speed.
Yeah, definitely. If you buy what you need versus buy what you might need in 10 years, it's a good piece of advice, because when you buy too big and you're only using 5 or 10%, even you spend too much of your time figuring out what you're not using and not enough to push your business forward. But Ashish, bring in another whole line of questions. Just get away from the technology selection. What about from an integration standpoint? We got all kinds of questions from the audience on integrating the learning platform into the broader tech ecosystem. So whether that's for employees, or whether it's in student academia, student information systems, or whether that's AMSs or CRMs, what should our listeners know about integration strategies to be able to do this in a short time frame? The last thing anybody wants to do is spend a couple months building out custom integrations. What do we need to know?
Definitely. So see, first of all, although we are a learning technology platform, but there is no use case where we are the only platform that learning and training organizations are using, right? Hence, every learning organization has to think from a technology stack perspective, right? Even before they start considering the learning platforms, our recommendation has been to kind of just draw out the entire tech stack. I think the learning platform sits right squarely in the middle of it, but then there are the sales and marketing engines, the CRMs and marketing automations. There are the business process and business operations systems. There is the identity management systems, and then business intelligence, if you will, right? And all in all, the learning platform has to be very well integrated with all of this right out of the gate. Right? In today's world, where everything has to be stackable, not being able to integrate out of the box is just not an option. Right? And there are 2 elements around integration. So, just of course the technology integration, but it should solve for 2 things. First is the data. The data should flow very fluidly across all this, because at the end of the day, what the learning organizations own is a learner profile and learner data. And the second piece of it is learning experience. Right? These systems might actually work very well in the background, but the learner should be able to jump between those very easily, and that's critically important as well. So I think starting from that tech stack diagram and then solving for data flow and learning experience is a winning combination.
And do you recommend that you try to find the productized integrations that the vendors are providing, or do you find that the tech eco stack is probably too complicated for that, so you need rapid deployed custom integrations? What are your thoughts?
No, I think I would stay away from custom. I think now there are standards emerging. The all platforms should be service oriented architecture, open APIs that can integrate well. We actually did a very interesting initiative with CompTIA, where on the content side, both organizations committed to becoming LTI 1.2 compliant and certified. So now we are saying the CompTIA content and the experience, can be consumed within this platform, but can also be embedded into any other platform. In fact, I mean, Ryan can speak to this, but the other thing that CompTIA has done really well is being able to kind of bring in simulations and labs and other elements into a single learning environment where all of these are very well integrated and data is flowing back and forth.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's keep moving on. Just like we thought, we have lots of content and not lots of time left. But Ryan, you touched on this just a little bit about how you had to transition your team to architects. Could you dig into that a little bit more? We had it probably more than any other group of questions was in this category of people, of having trainers that weren't familiar with online training, of having trainers that are writing content, as you said, that now have to be architects. How did you retrain your team? Where do they get the new skill sets from? How would you recommend somebody, a listener, starts that process, based on what you've experienced?
Yeah, I wish I could say more about that, because I inherited a really amazing team, and Ashish will attest to that. Some very talented people with some deep experience. I also brought in some people that I knew from previous work that did more specialize in some of the content space from the publishing world of eLearning. So that was really critical as well, to bring some people in with some of those newer skill sets, especially in terms of some of the print development that then translates into digital development. So a talented developmental editor and somebody who's directing product development on a day in, day out basis, that's their primary focus. I think that the architects, the builders to architects conversation, that's one that took a while, right? Because people don't want to let go of things. It's sort of like one of those things where they're holding it like this, and then slowly you kind of get them to that point, because if you want that speed, they understand, and they start to get they start to take an awareness and a seriousness about that role, and they can see how it benefits, and how the beauty of it is that you can scale, you can build 5 courses in the time it used to take you to build 1, because you've got a bunch of people working, and your job is to review it for continuity and accuracy and quality. And that's kind of fun. It's like playing in a band instead of playing solo. For me, as a leader, talent is everything. I think your talent is a way for you to set a culture that's effective, and also allows you to execute on your strategy. So for me, talent is everything. I think the biggest challenge, things that I look for, are accountability and attitude in times of change, because I see that people that don't want to change usually have issues with accountability and their attitude. Meaning, you get out of a meeting, everybody agrees that change is coming, we're going to do this, and then they're the one, off in a kind of sort of, pouting to other people and creating doubt around that process, and creating doubt around the need to change and move effectively and quickly. And that's problematic. So I think those are the 2 things that are always on my radar whenever you're really trying to force change, because if they don't see their accountabilities tied to this and their attitudes aren't positive, it's really hard to get over the hump quickly.
That's fantastic advice. Ashish, I'm going to hold on the second question there to make sure we get one of these last couple ones in promotion. Audience, I put in 3 links. I asked Dr. Carl Kopp, some of you may know him, a professor of instructional technology at Bloomsbury University, who focuses on instructional design aspects of creating microlearning. Anyway, he assembled some documents there that you go get some vendor neutral ID type best practices and tips also to help make this practical for you. So maybe we do ask that question before we do that. Ashish, Yeah, these are all great questions, but I'm going to stop right here real quick and ask you one that we just got another one coming online. What about the Zoom integration or the technology we're using today from a GoToWebinar standpoint? What should our audience expect the integration to a platform like that to do? Can you summarize that quickly on what you see as the base minimum here to make this work here rapidly?
Definitely. So Zoom works out really well. So I mean, not Zoom specifically, but kind of creating a virtual classroom environment is extremely valuable in this case. I would quickly kind of call out a few things. One is you got to streamline the administrator experience, right? So let's make sure that the admin who is creating and managing the platform can do it all in one place, and there's no additional time and effort and issues accordingly, right? So the front end experience is one thing, but the back end experience has to be streamlined.
Mm-hmm.
Second is data, right? So let's make sure that we capture the data coming out of the Zoom or any kind of virtual classroom experience, because once you start marrying the data on the virtual classroom and the digital platform or the self-study model, that's when magic happens. So make sure that in your implementation and integration, you're kind of capturing the data. And then last, but I would almost say like the most important one is keep it very simple for the learner. Integrate in a way where it's one click. They don't have to go to 4 different places. One login, one click, single sign on, launch, consume, come back to the platform, easy.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Just what I was looking for. You can go ahead and launch your Zoom classes independently, but if you can launch them through the LMS, then that begins the tracking and measurement process and allows you to do much more dynamic things. So really right from the beginning, you want to see if you can marry those two together as opposed to just having classes floating out there in an unmeasurable way going forward. So last thing, we talked about people just from a promotional standpoint. We only have a couple minutes left, so maybe a minute for each of you. I know it's not a lot of time, guess, but Ryan, you have a lot of different audiences, you have a lot of different marketing strategies, but with organizations that are probably used to marketing a certain way and having a certain kind of reoccurring revenue from your live training events or your trade shows every year,
Mhm.
now find themselves in a position that not only do they got to create the online version of this, but maybe they got to market it differently. And so is there an easy answer there? Like what would be, something that they should think about now as they're have to promote a new type of product? What advice would you give them to quickly try to hit the ground running?
Well, we have B2B and B2C. So I think with B2B, the big thing you want to be focused on is your sales training for your sales force. If you have a sales force that's out there doing that, obviously presenting now on Zoom and things like that, but make sure that you have that you're tying your marketing funnel to sales training activities, because if you want to get people down the funnel, the salesperson's putting that qualified lead into the CRM. What are the things that you as a product team or somebody in customer success is going to do to take that to the next level? So the next interaction the sales rep has, they've taken it farther down the road, right? So having those types of whether that be things like pilots or looking at prototypes, sort of showing them things behind the scene, involving customer development and market development activities that really help that. B2C, the real big challenge there is, I think this is a challenge across the board for the marketing, is attribution, right? I drive to O'Hare all the time, and there's all these, Brian Urlacher and Ryan Sandberg things about getting hair growth, and there's like 20 of them on the way to O'Hare. And you think about it, if you wanted to engage that service, was it the first time or the third time or the 7th time or the 27th time that person honestly made that phone call? And I think we deal with that with remarketing and ad spend. But we look at things like return on ad spend, and 3 to 4 to 1 is kind of what we've been getting, which is pretty darn good. So
yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. If I was driving to the airport, I'd be looking for not hair growth, but haircut signs.
That's a great point.
At this point, they're going to have to change it. All right. Well, folks, we're out of time here. If you haven't seen podcast at 37 here, you just go to talentedlearning.com and go to the podcast, and you'll find Ashish here and I on a similar type conversation. We want to thank everybody for attending. Ryan was right yesterday when he said we have a couple and a half hours worth of content, because I think we could dig into any one of these and keep on getting deeper and deeper into the good advice. But hopefully everybody got a sense of a professional development of what it looks like from a continuing education standpoint, and then advice on how you can trim up speed but keep quality or even improve quality across things from developing your strategy to developing your content and prioritizing your content for conversion, to how you can focus on your team members and make sure that you're selecting the right technology and even promoting it the right way. So maybe a good takeaway for today is to think about this conversion in those different buckets and make sure that you're doing the maximum of what you can in each one of those bucket areas to plan it well, but to execute with a sense of urgency. So Ryan Blankenship, Vice President of Product Marketing and or Product Management and Marketing at CompTIA. Thanks so much for joining us today. It was great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And I think I probably speak for Ashish too. DM us on LinkedIn if you want help and advice. Happy to do that for people who have questions and things like that.
Awesome, very kind of you. And Ashish Rangnekar, CEO and co-founder of BenchPrep. Thanks so much for coming today and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for having me. I mean, I just want to reiterate that all of us, the learning and training organizations, we should feel fortunate that we can really help millions and millions of learners out there. So let's work together to get there.
Sure fun being part of the solution and not part of the problem. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. Thanks for, we'll see you next month. All right. Thanks, everyone.